turn it down, will you? Turn it down. Yeah, give it a nice little fade out. Yeah. The music stops. That means we're on. Yes. Hello. Hi. I'm medically required to stand during this show, but that's not my name. My name, as you see, Ray Cotolo. We are here on the In the Money Media Network for special roundtable discussion. Again, I am Ray Cotolo. These are all of my files for those who are curious. One of them, for some reason, a picture of Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson, too. There's all sorts of fun stuff on this machine. The same way that there's a lot of fun stuff ahead on this stream. There will be 4 of the brightest minds inside of harness racing. And sure, you're going to see that there's going to be 5 people on this show. I'm not going to tell you who of the hosts of this show might not be the bright mind inside of this discussion, but ahead of this stream, we have the Dan Patch Stakes, $300,000 invitational at Harrah's Hoosier Park taking place this Friday, August 9th, it's included around a pick 5 and a $30,000 guaranteed pick 4 sequence. Who better then to first bring on to the roundtable than the man at the track himself, Mr. Jacob Rheinheimer. Jacob, a man who we all know is on the broadcast, but also does a lot of stuff behind the scenes. In a way, you are Mr. Hoosier Park.
Well, I don't know about that, but I sure appreciate the intro. I really appreciate you having me. And man, we're looking forward to a great day on Friday night. I think it's going to be a really fun betting race to Dan Patch, and it's a really fun betting card. If you're looking for full field, some good guaranteed wagers, we've got you covered on Friday night because the Dan Patch card always delivers in that sense.
Well, and plus, too, for a stakes card, you also have so many of your horses that are racing week in and week out, more of your overnight types that are getting chances at big purses also, which I think makes it an even more unique type of card. That's something that Mike and I, actually, as we're going to bring him in, we're talking about earlier today as we were doing a hit for the Players podcast here on In the Money Media. Mike, there are a lot of times tracks have their big race, but not many are willing to just put their big race and then showcase just their regular stock racing on the card, giving them some nice purses as well.
Yeah, really big purses, and so guys are going to be going for it. I mean, they need to make that money night in, night out. So the big pots, they're going to be some racing. There's lots of carryovers at Hoosier. That's one thing that is definitely known for. We got some huge fields, 10 and 11 horse fields, second tier spots. There's going to be a lot of racing. I would expect a huge handle. Last year they broke the handle record. Let's hope they can do it again this year.
And let's bring in another member of the Caesars family, though she not on site at Hoosier, she on site at another property. Finding time to join us here for this discussion, Jenna Otten, as we can I guess we can guess. You must be at El Dorado, Scioto.
Yep, there it is. Yeah, I'm very honored, thankful that you guys asked me to be a part of this roundtable.
And then last but not least, a man who has become very quickly a friend of mine, not only just in soul and spirit, but also in professionalism as well. He is the track announcer at Oak Grove Racing, Gaming, and Hotel. He's Mr. Peter Kleinhans, and just giving him that title alone does not capture who Peter Kleinhans is. He's a man of many talents.
Well, thanks, Ray. I'm thrilled to be on this. Looking forward to it. A new experience for me, and great racing, as everyone said. Curious to see, my selections match up with everyone else's, and just how everyone thinks about this racing.
Well, and many people might not know, too, that Peter Kleinhans called the first Dan Patch at Harrah's Hoosier Park. And now here we are 30 years later, and he, too, has been doomed to the world of podcasting. But he might play a song for us at the end of the show. You see that guitar that's hanging out right behind him. He can strike a pretty nasty E minor.
He could sit up and drive, too. Maybe he'll be driving. So if somebody gets picked off, he can show up and drive one.
Well, yeah, Peter Kleinhans, he dominated at Oak Grove among the amateur drivers, but that's perhaps a different kind of show. This show, as we said, main focus going to be the Dan Patch, and maybe a little later, an interview with someone who owns one of the horses racing in the Dan Patch Stakes. But I'm not going to tease anymore. That's enough of a teaser. Let's dive right into the meat and potatoes of this here dinner that we're feasting. We have a pick 5 and a pick 4 taking up the last few races of the 15 race card on Friday. We start then with race number 11. Race 11 is the Greg Haston Memorial, $25,000 purse for Open 2, Open 3 Pacers. So, Jacob, give us an idea. So the Open 2s, the Open 3s, we know that they kind of operate similarly from track to track, but what types of horses are we going to be dealing with inside of this race? Are they really going to be the top of the top, or are these going to be more kind of your upper condition horses we're looking at?
So the way, especially the Greg Haston works on Dan Patch night, that's usually kind of your horses, your local horses that may have been eligible to the Dan Patch and didn't want to go in the Dan Patch, wanted to step lower, or kind of the top end of the condition ranks in this Greg Haston Memorial. You got Low Rider, who's the morning line favorite in this 11th race. He's been pretty dominant, or very, very competitive to say the least, in the opens here at Hoosier Park, racing with Buzzsaw Russ and Coach Stephanos you were going to see in the Dan Patch. So you see horses like him, and then you've got some horses that are just hot right now, kind of working their way up the class ladder.
And this race named after someone that Pete also longtime friends with, Mr. Greg Haston. For you, Pete, seeing a race like this named after a buddy of yours, what kind of feeling is that?
Yeah, well, that was actually a really tragic day at Hoosier Park. Greg Haston was the leading driver in '94 and in '95 as well. And then as the '96 season began, he was actually in a fatal car crash. It was just shocking to everyone then. And so it's nice to see him still remembered here. He was really one of the originals at Hoosier Park as a driver.
And so he gets this race here with a decent field of 9 coming into this race. Some horses that, Pete, I know you might be familiar with as well. Caption This was racing down at Oak Grove. We saw Low Rider a couple of times. I think Serious Mickey might have made a showing here or there. So, Pete, let's start with you, breaking down this 9-horse field. Who kind of has your eye inside of this race that kicks off the 50-cent pick 5?
Well, I found this a pretty tough race. I like the 7 Bunderon N a lot. The problem is I don't see a clear path to the winner's circle for him. I'm very impressed by his closes into fast final halves. Last time he came home at 54 and change. He had 1 mile where he came on, I think, 52 and 3 or 52 and 4. So, I mean, this horse is a tremendous finisher, and I do think he's the class of the field, but I am concerned about the post. So it's not a strong endorsement. The 4 American Classic went a nice first over journey against these, and I agree that the 5 Low Rider will probably have the best trip of the group. So between those 3, I'll go with American Classic simply because of price.
Now, Jacob, one thing that I found interesting with this race specifically, Tyler George had 2. And so, of course, Trace Dietrich going to be listed on both since Trace is his main guy to call on. What do you take, though, that Trace takes the 8 versus the 7 inside of this race?
Well, I do think, having watched both of them here at Hoosier Park for the last couple of weeks, I think Rolling Like Thunder's a little bit easier to drive than Bundoran. Bundoran's been a horse where I think he's had some tough luck here at Hoosier Park. I actually put him on top with Brett Miller doing the driving, but that's something to keep in mind. Tyler George is king here at Hoosier Park. We're just past the halfway point of the season, and he pretty much already has the training title wrapped up. He's doubled up the guys in 2nd and 3rd. In terms of training wins. So Tyler George is always kind of king when you get to these conditioned open level horses here. But, I've been burnt quite a bit when you kind of pay too much attention to the horse Trace opts to choose with the Tyler George trainees, because you can usually find some value then on the other Tyler George horse.
Jenna, when you're looking at a race like this, obviously there are some horses that have much more class than others. Are you kind of siding with the horses that have been doing well against the higher levels, or do you think some of the ones moving up might be able to sneak in here?
Yeah, I went with the 3, probably that'll be the favorites, the 4, 5, and 7. I really like American Classic in this spot, though. Low Rider was tough last week. He just got the pass on the front end by better horses. Coach Stephanos and the other 3 kind of just swallowed him up there late. The driver change to Yannick on the 4 might play a huge role. Last week he was kind of hot in the pocket, and Devin could never really get him to calm down, so he had to come a tough first over grind. Still paced home well and still finished up the mile well, but I think it's the 3 that's been competing in this level week in and week out.
That is true, Mike. You do have some horses that have faced, excuse me, some of the ones that are in the Dan Patch later in the card. But do you think that maybe now that they have the easier terrain that they're hands down going to be better than everyone, or do you think that maybe someone can sneak through?
I mean, this is not an easy race. It's difficult. A lot of these horses are very good, and a lot of it's going to be the trip. I like American Classic. I like the driver switch. I like that race on July 17th at the Meadows. Really was never losing that race. Then shipped down here straight into the Open. Buzzsaw Ross, Coach Stefano's really, really tough horses that are obviously in the Dan Patch. So I like that. I think that the inside post should have this horse very much either on the front end or right in the pocket again. Just needs to get room. I do think that he kind of prefers it up front, and that's not that he can't win from off the pace, but I do think that would be an advantage for him. Low rider's very obvious speed, but has been maybe going just a little bit backwards in those last 2 races. That race 3 back though, 25-2 kick. I mean, that's really difficult to ignore. He likes to win. 14 wins the last 2 years, but he's had a lot of races too. I mean, he had 23 races already this year. So that's, I think, something you need to think about in the race. I agree on the 7. And the 8's interesting too. He would be more like a B type for me. He doesn't have the kicks that the other ones do, but again, on his day, you get Trace Tetrick here. This is a softer spot than the last couple. It wouldn't surprise me. It's probably going to be the best price of all of them. So I do think casting a little bit of a wide net in this race is probably the right move.
I kind of feel the same way, though I'm surprised not many have said or had any endorsement for Quixote inside of this race, coming off of those back-to-back wins, moving up in class. Again, there are other horses inside of this race that, given their experience against the tougher competition, it makes more sense that maybe they might be more competitive. But if you have a horse on the upswing, I feel like you want one like Quixote, who is making those bold first up moves, powering forward, not necessarily going the speed that might be necessary inside of this race, because, others are able to go 49, 48 if necessary. But I feel like Quixote stands a chance inside of this race as well. Bundoran, we've talked about, is kind of an obvious one. And I'll be honest, I really didn't have that much of an opinion on American Classic, but for one, seeing how many of you are kind of leaning towards him. And also, Mike, you pointed out that July 17th line. I mean, you look at that race at the Meadows. He brushed forward into a 28-4 second quarter, carried that speed home into a 54 and change back half to win as the even money favorite, beating some nice horses. Sand between my toes. We all remember what he did at Hoosier Park a couple of years ago. So I feel like I'd probably be siding with the 6 and 7, definitely kind of throwing the 4 in there, especially since Gingras, who we know likes to go forward, might be able to go forward with a horse that likes to go forward. That's pretty much the 11th race. The 12th, the John Schuster Memorial late closing series final for non-winners of 6,700 in their last 4 starts. They got 11 horses going postward here, 10 and 11 in the second tier. Jacob, how does the second tier play at Harrah's Hoosier Park like this? Because I know at Oak Grove, when you have the 9 and 10, that second horse really makes the job harder for the inside horse in the second tier. But with that long Hoosier stretch, is it kind of more fair for the second tier horses?
Well, ordinarily, I mean, we usually only have fields of 10. It's really only on a night like this where we'll extend it and put 11 horses in a field. So I never mind post 10 traditionally. I don't like it when you add an 11th horse in there and you're already essentially starting the race boxed in, especially in a race like this where these horses are racing for more money than they're going to race for all year long. But we saw the Dan Patch won from post 11 last year with Ponda Warrior getting the job done. So if there's a lot of action early, you're just kind of getting started in the conveyor build a little bit early and you'll get some live cover. There's going to be a lot of movement up the backstretch in a situation like this. So I really don't mind post 11, but post 10, when you have 11 horses in there, just not a fan of that.
Well, Jacob, this is certainly an interesting race, too. I mean, for one, we see a horse like Working On a Mystery, and you don't necessarily think that he'd be in the hours of $6,700 class given his record. But, he's an older guy now with that loads of back class inside of this race. And you got a really speedy one from Jeff Culliford stuck in the second tier in big wheels, having to wonder how he's going to go about. Do you think that this could be a race that sees a lot of action and maybe we see someone coming flying out of it?
I do, and I actually kind of went for a big price on top just for that reason. I actually put number 2, And Away We Go, on top. Jordan Ross and Rodney Roberts teaming up here, 15-1 on the morning line. But I went back and watched his replay in the elimination last week, and he was in good position. And then the cover on the turn in front of him just absolutely died. Had to go 3 wide on the turn. They got the jump in front of him, but I still thought he rebounded nicely, got home in 26 and change. Finished second against similar company in 3 straight right before that. So I think he's in really good form. The Rodney Roberts barn is a barn to keep an eye on in some of these condition races throughout the card. I know he's only batting at 206 on the year as a whole, but the last couple months, this barn's really kind of woken up here at Hoosier Park, and Jordan Ross driving very well right now.
Mike, I know in our hit for the players pod earlier today, you were really keen on a horse inside of this race. Do you think that you might go slender and just to him, or do you think that you might also cast a little bit of a wide net inside of here?
I do like the 7 here, Henry the horse. Now, I was surprised to see he was 10-1 morning line. Those last 2 lines are very sharp. 26-1 kick 2 back, and then the elimination just missed by less than a length, kicking 26-3. I think he's improving. He doesn't win all that much, but this is probably his top form. It's a 4-year-old coming against some of these other ones. There's plenty of speed to set it up for him, and I like that Wilfong ended up on this horse here too. Especially since as well as Big Wheels has been racing. That was a nice move by this horse last time. Made an early move to win his elimination. Really held safe late, and had a couple chasing him that you thought he might get caught, but he never did. And watching our coin in the race was even money coming off a drop. But this horse has missed quite a bit of time, so this horse probably could be better in the race. I prefer the 7. I think I would use the 9 and the 10. The post is difficult, but another early move, and the post doesn't really matter as much. So I think it's probably those 3, but I would be heavy weighted on the 7 in the race.
Jenna, how do you go about tackling this race?
I went back and watched what Mock David did last week, and he was able to find room late up the inside. And now you put Mark McDonald. I'm sure we all know he likes to go forward off of the wings, but he was facing what I believe would be tougher in 2 or 3 back. He had post 9, could never really get involved in the race, but sprinted home there in 25-4. Then the week after that, he got away 7th by 12 and rolled the rail to a 3rd place finish, again sprinting home 25-3. And then last week, I was able to get away closer to the action and sat and was patient, found room up the rail late in that long stretch, and was able to hold off Henry the horse late in the stretch there. And then Mark McDonald clearly likes to go forward, so hopefully we can trip out on Mock David here in the 12th.
Ooh, so could we maybe think then for multi-purposes that might be a Jenna single inside of this race? Or?
No, it's not. I think an interesting play is the rail horse as well. Second starts Marvin Luna. He raced well last week. If they get too hot up front early, Shakertown doesn't sprint home as quickly as the other ones have, but he's put up a 49-4 mile 2 starts back. Kind of worked out in his favor. So I used a couple horses.
And certainly looking up and down the page, Pete, it really does look like a race where a lot of horses are going to try and play their hands early. And especially you see a horse like the 3 Better Than Spring, who always goes forward, but then never really carries his speed home. Are you kind of the similar camp of maybe trying to go with the closer here?
This is the kind of race where I'm not going to try to predict pace exactly. It could work out that there's a ton of speed, especially as everyone has mentioned with the 11th horse in there. More motion starts earlier, but you never know. Sometimes that cover flow is very slow to get towards the leader, and they're able to back it down. So I don't know, but I agree with Jacob's selection. The 2 Away We Go. I also thought that last race a really tough trip, and was overcoming it. Was racing very well there. Hard to complain about any of his recent efforts. The 10 Big Wheels. It's interesting. I actually was thinking about the issue with the 11 horse before it was being discussed here. I'm not that concerned about it because the 11 seems so slow off the gate. He's had the rail 4 times and has gotten away 7th, 3rd. Just doesn't look like a horse who's going to be able to really box the 10 into me. So I have a sense that if the 1 leaves well enough to carry the 10 into it, he'll be in pretty good shape, maybe 5th or so. So I'm going to use him 2nd. And Better Than Spring, I feel that, there's a chance the race won't have as fast a pace as we expect, in which case I think Better Than Spring isn't all that bad. He's been setting fast fractions in these races. Last time he had to make 2 moves. I think he's all right. So I went to 10 and 3.
I know I was surprised looking at this race that Away We Go was 15-1 on the morning line, because I thought this horse really stood a good chance inside of this race. Just even though he's been win shy, 1 for 12 so far this season, I feel like it's good to try and go with a horse that's going to be somewhat close, because you do have the possibility of there being a fairly fast pace. But in the event that it's just kind of a moderate pace, then your horses that are more kind of stalking mid-pack types are going to have a better chance to get into the action than some of these more stout closers. It's, in my mind, the two seems like a slam dunk in that sense, even though, you know, he was short against Fox Valley Landis and then Rock with JK and Rip. Like there are lots of caveats at play with him, which maybe makes him a longer shot inside of the race. But I feel like he stood a great chance, just given that a lot of these other horses, they don't really go forward. They kind of go the speed that they are capable of, and then just kind of stall there and land wherever they can. I thought Henry the Horse, Mike, is also a good horse to throw on inside of this race, just given he also can push off the wings. He can take back. Those types of options against a field like this are going to be a huge asset for a horse like him. But I also couldn't help but really think about this race class-wise, and the 9 Watching Our Coin is coming in on such an interesting progression, given that he was in against horses like Lowrider, Bondurant, Ponda Warrior in the Opens. In the Open 1, Open 2, he came back off from a week off, just went kind of an even trip, came into this late closing series, failed as the even money favorite, but you have to wonder if his back class is really going to help him against a group like this, where many of the other horses are coming from either non-winners of 3,000, maybe hover around the non-winners of 6,000, and maybe, just maybe, the outside post too might be able to help his price inside of that 12th race. We're not going to get to the third.
Ask Jacob here,
yes.
Ray. I just, races like this with the morning line, it just, this race feels like it could be quite jumbled on the odds board. I mean, really, who's going to be the favorite in this race? I mean, the way that the morning line stacks up here, it doesn't seem like any of us agree with it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked to see Big Wheels go off as favorite just because of how impressive he was in the Elim last week. But I do agree. I was pretty surprised to see 10-1 on Henry the Horse. Similar story for Down by the Seaside, who's been finding some really good form of late. And we've seen him at this Open 3 level and levels above where he's at right now. So it's one of those things. We do have the Trackmaster morning line. It can be a little hit or miss at times, I do believe. But I agree. And I don't expect I expect the favorite probably around that 3-1 range in a race like this.
Do you think, what are the chances then, Jacob, we get the 15-1 on Away We Go?
Well, I felt okay about that until we had this conversation. We got 3 of us who really like him, so I don't like that 15-1 price anymore.
The dastardly Trackmaster morning line and its computers trying to do the work of math on my watch. We're not going to talk about the 13th race just yet. That race, you're going to find out why we aren't talking about it yet. And as a teaser, we may have introduced this whole roundtable being centered around that race. But we'll get to that one later. We're going to talk about race number 14 next. It's included inside of that pick 4 sequence. $30,000 guaranteed pool inside of that pick 4. By the way, Jacob, since you are our resident Harrah's Hoosier Park master, we have that pick 4 guarantee. I know inside of the 13th race, the stakes, there's also a guaranteed pool as well. What kind of betting stuff can we look forward to on this Friday card?
Yeah, you touched on those two, and then we're going to kick off the card with the early pick 5. We'll offer a $10,000 guarantee on that early pick 5 sequence in races 1 through 5. Then at the very end of the night, we'll also have a $15,000 guarantee on the Hoosier High 5 on that race 15 finale. Then you mentioned the $30,000 late pick 4. You talked about how we do oftentimes have some carryovers. So if things get a little bit wild there in the early pick 4, we will have an instant carryover. And then that $30,000 guarantee on the stakes race that shall go unnamed.
That's good to know too, because some tracks sometimes will carry it over to the next card, but that means you want to be watching from the start to catch whatever action might be happening, and maybe, just maybe, you might be able to bet into a nice carryover. I got someone touching in on this controversy between computers and math. Mr. John Rallis saying, who needs math? It's overrated. And I agree. Morning lines should be left to the imagination. Of course, John himself, I think he does something. I really don't know what he does anymore.
He does the morning line at the Meadowlands.
Oh, is that what he does?
Yeah.
I thought he made rotisserie chicken. This 14th race, the Manly Sturgis, is probably a really good chicken too. Manly Sturgis for non-winners of 4 on the pace. this race here. We got 10 horses going postward. Jenna, this is definitely an interesting race because this could be an anchor leg for many people inside of the multi-leg sequences with a horse like Angel Hill to the inside. Are you a believer, or do you think maybe this could be an opportunity to try and snag a price?
Yeah, I believe we touch on our tickets a little later, but Angel Hill, a big stand. I like to take against 3-year-olds in a spot like this, and she's 4, and she's on quite a win streak. She's rifled off 3 in a row here. Horses like All JK definitely have a shot in here if Angel Hill doesn't bring her A game. But again, a Sire Stakes filly, probably in the middle of stakes assignment. Yeah, you're going for 25,000, but just don't know how aggressive Trace is going to be with this star filly of Brian Brown's, and then also the 10 horse as well. She's also in the middle of stakes assignments, so just don't know how aggressive we want to be with the horses like that in between these, Sire Stakes that are going for $95,000 and $50,000. Where Angel Hill, this is kind of what she has here. 3-year-old and she's an aged mare, and against 3-year-olds, I believe, are the bottom horses of her company. So the rail can be a little tricky maybe to maneuver. Brett Miller in the bike, and again, Trace opting off Tyler George horse for the Brian Brown horse is a little interesting.
Yeah, Jacob, I know that you don't like to read too much into the Trace decisions, but Jacob, he's picking off Tyler. He's picking off Tyler's horse. How could he do that?
Yeah, and you don't want to nitpick a mare that's coming off 3 straight 49 and change wins here at Hoosier Park since coming to the track, but she was on empty crossing the wire last time out with Trace Dietrich in the bike. Only got home with 27-2, but she was on her hands and knees crossing the wire there, nearly got nailed by her stablemate. I actually kind of took the exact opposite approach to Jenna, where I loaded up on the 3-year-olds in this race. Part of my reason being is in Indiana Sire Stakes Company, they're actually just kind of racing for second all year long because Let's Go Enavanera is by far the best 3-year-old pacing filly we have. And this is kind of an opportunity for them to take home a really nice paycheck. So I actually went with Flirt and Finera. I think if Ricky McCumber Jr. from the second tier is going to put her nose right on that Brett Miller helmet with Angel Hill and get towed along nicely, Flirt and Finera is a mare that needs a little bit of help to kind of set up for her. And if Angel Hill gets away on the front end like she has recently and sets some wild fractions and then gets tired late in the lane there, I think Flirt and Finera is going to be there to pick up the pieces late.
Certainly, Peter, inside of any type of multi-race sequence, of course, you could also look at this race vertically as well, but we have a pretty strong favorite potentially inside of the 1, and so that does leave a lot of value to maybe trying some of these other horses. So are you kind of going into the same strategy as Jacob here inside of this race, trying to find some other prices?
Absolutely. I really don't like the 1, but I'm having a hard time finding the right horse to beat her. This is one of these horses who, clearly improved tremendously off the trainer change and a little bit of a layoff. So that whatever new schedule this horse is on is working. And whenever you have a horse that suddenly improves this way and yet still fits easier conditions, they're going to have lines like when they win by 14 lengths because they're no longer fitting that. They no longer deserve to be in that class. And this horse obviously immediately began at a much higher level once she returned to the races. The question is, where's the upper limit? And I think that what Jacob said about her finish last week says it all. She's reached her limit. Now that doesn't mean that she can't win this race because every other horse has some problems too. But I feel like she's the kind of horse that I like to try to beat. And that's the best I could say. All JK was originally going to be my first choice. I actually listened to what Jenna was saying about the 3-year-olds, and I'm like, yeah, that makes some sense in the middle of a Sire Stakes season. So maybe I wouldn't want to go with that horse. And then I continued to eliminate horses one by one. So I'm ending up with no pick.
Honestly, that is the boldest move I've ever seen a public handicapper.
No one has ever
do.
abstained on here. No one.
Honestly, I'm jealous now that I wasn't the first to do that. Mike, I guess since it's popular now, do you think this is an abstain race, or do you think Angel Hill might still be able to get there?
Yeah, I'm not doing that, but I love it. I mean, it's great that he did that, and it was really funny. And I think you have to make a decision on Angel Hill versus All JK. I think those are the two horses in the race, and what Jenna says is very true. A lot of these stakes horses that are in between and looking at overnights, they kind of take these races and use them more as preps. But But they're adding Lasix to this horse, and I'm not sure if that's maybe a test run. I'm sure that she has much more stakes to go this year. But like Jacob says, that they're chasing a monster in those sire stakes. So why not try to get a little confidence for this horse? She still lacks a win this year, also. So she's going to be a short price on the board, lacks a win, adds Lasix. You have to kind of decide: do you want to double the ticket with that one? I don't see how you can get around Angel Hill just because she's faster than these horses, and she really has no reason not to try here. And she's obviously very improved since getting to the big track. They're going to have a hard time beating her, whereas other horses maybe have bigger fish to fry other places. The other ones just aren't fast enough. That's just my opinion. So if you don't like Angel Hill and you want to spread out, be my guest. But I think most of the tickets are going to flow through that one. Maybe the 3-year-olds can beat her, but I don't know. Just not for me. I'll stick with Angel Hill.
That's kind of the tough place I'm at as well, because while you could maybe think that a horse like Angel Hill probably doesn't rank as highly as Let's Go End of an Era, just given that one's able to dominate inside of the sire stakes so well, Angel Hill can still on fumes go a 149 in 3 mile. That's like 1 or 2 lengths that many horses still have to try and find inside of a race like this. And while the pylon post might possibly make her job more difficult trying to go forward, it at least cuts out her having to rush over the cones to get to the lead. And even then, she's been able to race well from off the pace, closing into a 55-1 back half. The win against Nauer's a 4,700 2 starts ago. As much as I hate to really forfeit and bow down to the chalk, I'm kind of with Pete in a way. I processed through of elimination my way down the list of horses inside of this race, and I just couldn't really think of who might be able to muster the whimsy to go up and get by a horse like Angel Hill inside of this race. All JK adding the Lasix certainly is interesting. That might help her find a little more inside of this race. And honestly, she's the next most logical, but in my head, especially when we talk tickets later, you either have to take Angel Hill or take All JK. It doesn't make sense to take both, given that they're both going to take so much money inside of this spot. And I will say of Grand Circuit, since that one came from Oak Grove, nice little horse for the Millers, but I don't necessarily think she's ready for 49 mile just yet. But she was able to go some really crazy miles, as you might remember, Peter, down at Oak Grove. That there, the 14th. We'll talk then the payoff leg of the pick 5 and pick 4, race 15. Don't worry though, folks. We're still going to talk about race 13, the stakes, the one that everyone is most likely watching for analysis of. But first, we got to talk about the Myron McHenry final. This is an interesting class. Horses that started for a base claiming price of $15,000, basically your $15,000 claimers competing inside of this race. 11 horses going postward in this one. I might have a hunch bet with the 10 odds on Alpha Male, but what about you, Mike? How do you approach this race?
Is that a play against for you, or what is that?
Well, no. It would be a hunch bet. Would mean like it expresses what I am, and so I have to bet it. I wouldn't bet it. You don't bet against a hunch bet.
I'm not sure that anybody's going to make that comparison, but I like the inside 3 here. Sweet Truth, the 3. Closer, 25-4 kick last time. That really sticks out on this page, and probably can win this race with that repeat of that. Even though 1 for 14 this year, has 14 lifetime wins, certainly fits at this level. The 2 Dirty Image, another one that's racing very well. Last 2 starts are very good after a couple kind of duds versus claimers. So I think should be in the right spot given the post. And then the 1 Rocket Russell, a couple wins, 2 and 3 back. And then stepped in, just got beat last time by Dirty Image. I think that those inside 3 dominate the race, but these races are wide open, and there's a lot of different ways you can go, especially if it heats up. So if you can get alive to many in this last race, I would try to do that.
Jenna, do you see this race as equally wide open?
I don't know how equally wide open. I use a few horses in here. An interesting play. The 6 actually has been racing at Scioto a few times. Sellside Kid. He looked really strong here in his debut and got a little weak and weary down by the wire and ended up making a break there and then came back with a very good efforts. Had to snuck through the passing lane here and got a win. And then here at Scioto had post 10, and that's kind of like a forgivable spot this year. Horses cannot win here at Scioto from post 10 at all. Then went over to Hoosier and was fourth here last weekend against similar company, 51-4 mile. But the horse that caught my eye and will probably be the top choice in here, the one Rocket Russell, Tyler George, Trace Tetrick again. Always calling out this duo, I feel like, at Hoosier, but was second, just beating a half a length last time out. He's a horse that likes to be on the front end or track from a helmet, and he's been taking on this company for the last starts, and he was dominant in the 12, so he jumps up in class, and I think he can grab a win here against the 15s this week.
Yeah, Jacob, looking at this race, one of the things, of course, Hoosier known for is that long, never-ending, my God, are they ever going to get to the finish line stretch? And with these inside horses, you have a horse like Rocket Russell, who only recently was able to come a sub 28-second final quarter. And then you look down the page, you see horses that are able to really fly down that stretch drive, 26 and change, 25 and change final quarters. Do you think that the closers over that stretch tend to fare better, and that maybe a horse like Rocket Russell might be hard to take, just given how long and gruesome that stretch drive can be?
So I think that people can actually overplay the quarter-mile long stretch a little bit and kind of talk yourself into closers. I actually tell people Hoosier Park plays more closely to a 5/8 mile track than you think it does, just because oftentimes we get a lot of slow middle halves, and it ends up being a sprint down that quarter-mile stretch. And if you're coming home in 26-2, it doesn't really matter if the race is coming home in 26 and change. You're not going to make up a whole lot of ground. So I do feel very strongly. That being said, when you put some money on the line and all of a sudden we get to the half and 54 and change in a class like this, then it opens the door for some closers. But, Rocket Russell is really interesting. I was surprised to see him as the morning line favorite. I know he's won 5 of the last 7, and you get Trace Tetrick and Tyler George. But he was a horse that until recently did not like to win, actually, here at Hoosier Park. And I just kind of turned myself off of him. And then Sweet Truth's the exact opposite, because he shows all of those last quarters. I don't think Sweet Truth and Shady Jake are just two horses I have burnt more cash on here at Hoosier Park over the last several years, because they always get home in 25, 26 and change. But I just keep going back to them. And I went back to Sweet Truth again here tonight. Also include number 8, Rockin' Marty, Ricky McCumber Jr. and Jamie McCumber coming off a win in the elimination, 152, swept them in 26 flat. This is a horse that was racing against much better company pretty much all summer long before they dropped him into the spot. I think this is a very comfortable level for Rockin' Marty.
Peter, then, for this race that ends the pick 4 and the pick 5, how do you tackle it?
I'll actually go with a single in this one. This 3 Sweet Tooth, I really like a lot here. I just think, again, the horse obviously needs to get a trip, needs to get in a flow, but it seems like it's a very good possibility he could just follow the 2 Dirty Image, who might end up first over. He'd be second over. I just love these last, he's been caught in really the wrong spot in all of his races. Last time it was 56-2, very slow half. They came home in 55-1, and he made up 8 lengths into that. So, a tremendous close in a situation where it wasn't favoring closers. The start before that, same thing. The second half was much faster than the first half. He was trying to get involved from a very difficult spot. The start before that was the one he left into, and that's actually the one that had the faster pace. I just think he's really in the right spot to beat these horses. He doesn't have that much of an advantage on them, but I just think if he gets in a flow outside, I just think he'll outfinish them. Everybody else, Rocket Russell, I don't mind the fact that he's speed, because he's been speed at Hoosier before, so why would this week be that different? I just don't think he's quite as good as Sweet Truth. He's the one who was able to set the slower fraction last time. So I'm just going to give a strong endorsement to the 3 here.
I just want to say, just because Pete and I are on the same page and we have very like minds, that is not necessarily the reason why we were partners at Oak Grove. It just happens to be a coincidence in my mind that we're both. I look at this race the same way, and I look too at that race 3 starts ago. That really catches my eye, because this guy, I got Pete up by mistake. I'm doing so many things at once here. I meant to put me up. It's my time to shine. Thanks, me. Sweet Truth finally gets a good draw. Had post 6, 7, 8, 7, 7, 8, 5, 4. And if you call that number, you might be the winner of a $10,000 prize. Who knows? But Sweet Truth, from those outside draws, I'm not surprised that he took back and then was having to close into those races. At least that start 3 starts ago shows that he has gate speed. And given that he has that inside draw, in my mind, he has to use it. And if he uses it, he's going to be close enough where he is either going to be able to overhaul a horse like Rocket Russell, who sometimes kind of wavers in the stretch drive, or overall whoever else is in front of him. I really feel like this race does kind of play to all of his strengths. And many of the other ones are probably going to have to hope that it totally falls apart and gets that kind of 54 front half, as Jacob kind of tossed out there, for anything else to really happen inside of this race, the 15th. I shouldn't say speaking of, what I should say is we're going to the 13th race then, the feature of this whole live stream, the $300,000 Dan Patch Invitational. And what better time then to bring in a man who owns one of the horses racing in the Dan Patch Invitational. He is the head of an Italian family who also happens to own massive cats. That's why he's named Don Tiger. Don Tiger, of course, the famed owner of one Charlie May. First off, welcome to the show, Don. And secondly, how does it feel to own the winner of the 2024 Dan Patch Invitational?
We'll save that for Friday night or Saturday morning. So hopefully that's the case.
Now, of course, Don, you have a horse that is 12-1 on the morning line inside of this race, but he's taken his shot a couple of times in this Dan Patch. Got foiled last year. How are you feeling about the old guy's chances this time around?
Oh, we think we got a huge chance. I mean, 12-1 morning line. My good friend, late good friend, Dave Brower, he used to always make the morning line. If the morning line correct, you're a hero. If it's off, you can be a zero. But I think the morning line is way too high on Charlie. He's still in the top 3 or 4 in the race, in my opinion. He'll probably get done that way. I would assume. But no, he comes into it perfect. We have a winner circle this year, but we're facing really tough competition. As Jenna knows, it's nothing easy in Ohio. We got a lot of good sparring partners in Carbine, Little Rocket Man, Artac. I mean, these horses could go on a grand circuit, in my opinion, as well. So we haven't gotten the exact right trip, but he's going to get a nice trip. He had the 10-hole last year over there, and he came first up early, battled to the wire, and just got picked up off of his back. So I don't know what kind of trip he's going to get, but we're excited. He's coming into the race right, so he's got as good a chance as anybody in there, to be honest.
Don, of course, he loves the racetrack. I mean, he's been here several times. He's raced very well. He just missed last year to a Trip Dot winner. I think the big track, even though he can go on any surface, was more a strength for him. I mean, we see how he goes over the Meadowlands, and even though that Houghton trip was brutal, really, I mean, it seems like he's holding his form.
Yeah, he's been great. I mean, the tough part about that division is they're interchangeable, and I mean, when I look at, once we pay into all the entry fees, I look at the races. I mean, there's a lot of horses missing from action right now that are excellent free-for-allers. So just the fact that you can kind of keep one sound and healthy, and we race the horse basically. We prep him for these big races. So last week he drew bad, and we ducked him, and kind of prepped him to be ready for tomorrow, or for Friday night. So. That's why the horse is still around at 6 years old, because we do take good care of him. So it's he can get over the big track, small track, 5/8 half, but I think he'll be real good over there. Like I said, I think the race sets up good for him. I think the local horse, Backsaw Russ, he's got some excellent form. But despite Charlie not winning this year, believe me, he's coming into the race good, and he's going to make a good account of himself.
That's actually something I wanted to ask you about, Don, because obviously, sometimes when horses get older, they lose a little bit of steam. The joints just kind of get a little bit more creaky. When you get out of bed, you always have to make some kind of noise, or when you sit down, you always have to make some kind of noise. With Charlie May, though, as he's getting older, do you feel that maybe he's actually getting better, or do you think he's still just the same machine he's always been?
I think he's still the same machine he's always been. I mean, Brett Miller thinks he's the same machine he's always been. Steve Carter does, Ben Lindsay, Dave Young, everybody that's associated with the horse. And again, I mean, if you look at his card this year, he had that brutal trip in the Houghton. Other than that, he's been 1, 2, 3, 4 in every race against top-notch flight company. And again, we're just not going to brutalize them every week. You know, he got a real aggressive drive 2 back. He went to the quarter 25-2. He can leave. He can chase. He can do a lot of things, but we think his form's perfect right now. I think he's exactly where he was. I don't think he's lost a step. I don't think he's really moved forward. I know some horses, when they get 5, 6 years old, they kind of peak. I think he's maintained the same form he had last year. So, I mean, we're excited about the second half of the year. It's a division that's up for grabs. It'd be good to get a good race in him. But we've got a busy schedule the next 2 months. There's a lot of races on tap. So he's healthy, and we have him right where we want to be. So we'll see what happens.
Oh, well, since you're alluding to that, what kind of other things can we expect from Charlie May down the road?
So we have next week, we have a Send It In Pace over at Scioto. It's a nice invitational. It'll be dirty, too. There'll be a lot of good horses in that race. But it's always fun when you put everybody together, because then you kind of see where, you know, the men are separated from the boys. And then I always like to go out to Greenville Fair. I'm not sure if I'm going to make it this year or not. They have the Gene Regal out there. I participated in that last 2 years. It's just kind of a local thing I like to do. He set the track record last year over there, 150 for a fair track. Outside of Delaware, it's the fastest fair track mark in the country. So that's pretty cool. But that's a potential race. And then at the end of the month, we have a state bred aged pace that is kind of a mirror. If you guys did any handicapping of the Charna up at Northfield, it'll probably be a very similar race. Some of those horses will come out of there. That's at Scioto. And then into September, we have there's another race at Hoosier. I think it's called the Hoosier Pacing Derby. He's eligible for that. I know there's something else around that time period. And then obviously the ultimate goal, we want to get back to the Meadowlands for the Breeders' Crown. So, I mean, a good slate on his plate. And I think there's an invite or two in there too. Maybe something over at Yonkers for $200,000 or so. I can't remember. But anyway, he's got a good dance card coming up, and there should be some good races.
Real quick then, Don, I have pulled up the replay from last year just for a little bit of fun. I want to kind of pick your brain of how the experience was watching Charlie May live during this race. If that sounds good to you, we have the race up right here for you to watch. Kind of take us through your thoughts. They're past the half in 53-1. He's from the second tier last year too. You see him first up. Kind of what are you thinking when Brett pulls at this point?
Well, I was pretty excited because, I mean, again, I knew he was moving forward, and I can watch Brett's movements and I can watch Charlie's movements and kind of know where he is, so he's still chugging. The one fault this horse does have in his armor is once he gets up and engages someone, if he goes by, he tends to wait on horses a little bit. So he's still digging here. I feel good, and at this point, I'm thinking we're going to win the race. I was actually watching it from home on Fox Sports, and I was excited, and I knew we would outgame this horse when I saw the horse coming up on the outside. I was like, this is tough. And then obviously he gets up for second, and it was a good payday, so we're pretty pleased.
Real nice of you to leave out all the expletives that also associated watching that stretch drive from the 2023 Dan Patch. I want to open the floor, though, to the people on this panel as well. If anyone else has questions they want to ask Don about Charlie May ahead of this race before we really get into the breakdown of this race. Anyone here have a question they want to ask Don? Of course, open to the comments as well for everyone watching if they have any questions to bring in. And I'll see a raise of hands. Any raises of hands? We have all the questions answered? Okay.
Well, I just want to say enjoy the ride because, it's been a long time since I've been in the training game and had a horse, that good that you get to enjoy. Looking forward to races coming up and then the Breeders' Crown. Such a great place to be. So I like Charlie May a lot tomorrow. I picked him second. So whatever. I just have a great time because it's, so rare that you get these horses.
Wait, Pete, you're saying enjoy the ride. Have you trained a really nice one that we might all remember?
You don't know this?
Enough Talk was a great horse, but that was a long time ago now. It was 2008 and 2010. He was older trotter of the year, but it's been a long time since I've done that kind of training.
I think Enough Talk is right. Not only the horse you train, but also about this. What I'm curious about, Don, not only do you own horses, you bet on horses, and you have a horse like Charlie May inside this race who stands a chance. How do you, as a bettor, approach a race like this, given, you have the second tier, you have a bunch of horses that haven't really kind of proven themselves just yet. You have a horse coming in off a 68-1 upset at the Meadowlands on Hambletonian Day. What does this race look like to you as a gambler?
Yeah, as a gambler, I think you definitely can reach out and go pretty deep in this race. I mean, I obviously give a lot of credit to the two local horses, Coach Stefanos and Bucksaw Russ. I probably, if I was independently, I won't bet the race, but if I was betting the race and I wasn't had an ownership in it, I'd probably key those two horses with Charlie May, top and bottom, first and third, first and second, stuff like that. Because I do think someone's going to get in the middle of them and be a decent price. It looks like that kind of race. Like it's pretty wide open, and not all these times everyone gets to go for 300. So sometimes guys will overdrive a little bit. We got a lot of out of town drivers in to drive, so I think there'll be some jockeying, and there's some horses there that are off form that could catch form back up. Horses that are sharp, so it's a great betting race. So as far as somebody that likes to wager, I don't think you're going to find any more value probably on the weekend than the Dan Patch. I think you're going to see a lot of excitement, and that's what I would do. I mean, personally, though, knowing my horse, I'd probably bet Charlie across the board, and I'd play him top and bottom and exactas with the field, and hope for a bomber.
Well, Don, we appreciate you hopping in on the show as the sun very quickly has retreated from wherever it is you are right now.
Yes. I'm on a deck. I did you guys a favor because if I was inside the house, he would be yelling and screaming. So,
well, we appreciate nonetheless. Hopefully you have enough light to get back to wherever it is you need to go or just hang out there.
I just have to walk inside, so I'll be good. But I appreciate you guys taking some time to chat with me. And
good luck. Go get him.
Go get him. I appreciate it. All right. Take care.
That there, Don Tiger, for those who didn't catch my introduction to him earlier, he's not actually named Don Tiger because he's a mafia boss. I have to say that out of respect of the RICO law. That said, then, let's talk about what we think about this race. Obviously, Charlie May, a big factor here. But, Jacob, one of the main things with a race like this is a lot of the horses that race super well at Hoosier Park, week in, week out at the top class. They get their chance at the big purse. And interestingly enough, inside of this race, morning line favorite at 5-2, Buzzsaw Russ, fresh 4-year-old son of Rock and Image from a barn that has had success with older pacers in Melissa Essage. What chance do you give him inside of a race like this, as well as some of the other local horses competing inside of the Dan Patch?
Well, it's really interesting. You kind of touched on it there, where we've had a lot of local horses take their shot at the Dan Patch, and this race has been pretty historically cruel to the locals. Ponda Warrior is definitely the exception and not the rule. You go back to horses like Little Rocket Man. He's raced in it 3 times, hasn't missed a check, but he also never hit the board. Freaky Feet Pete missed checks both times. So did Always a Prince, not going back to Night Pro. So this race is very, very harsh to the local horses. But I think in a race like this, where it's as wide open as it is, I certainly understand why Rick Moore landed on Buzzsaw Russ as the morning line favorite. He's been a monster in 3 of his last 4. And starting 148-3, he just flatly outkicked Coach Stefanos, got the jump on him, went first up. I will say, and kind of about Buzzsaw Russ and Coach Stefanos, they are horses that aren't going to go out there and make their own race, though. They don't want to be on the front end. Coach Stefanos more so than Buzzsaw Russ. He likes to leave himself a lot more work to do than Buzzsaw Russ does, as Buzzsaw Russ can go first up and take a little bit more air than Coach Stefanos. But that's the only thing that kind of concerns me about the locals. I think Coach Stefanos, if we get a little bit of pace up front, he's going to be flying at the end of this mile. And Trace Dietrich still looking for his first win in the Dan Patch. He's the winningest driver all time here at Hoosier Park. And like I said, this race has been quite cruel to Trace, and I think that's one of his best shots to finally take this down.
And Coach Stefanos, real talk, Jacob, did he really go 24-4 in that Breeders' Crown elimination last year? Did he really do that?
He did, and I'm going to be honest with you, the form he was in at the end of last year, because he swept the field in the Monument Circle too. He was dead last turning for home, just found another gear late in the lane. I know Trace kind of talked last year. They changed his rigging a little bit. I think they added cutouts to him and started racing him from well off the back, and whatever he found at the end of last year, it just carried all the way through to the end of the year. He won some Grand Circuit races here. He was actually good in the Breeders' Crown behind Confederate, just left himself way too much work to do there in the Breeders' Crown final. But I know Trace has kind of talked to it. He was just a different horse towards the end of the last fall, and he showed the same kind of last quarters pretty much all summer long, racing out east in the Graduate.
Jenna, looking at a race like this, as we kind of also touched on in the introduction, you have many horses, some of them locals in the open classes. Coach Stefanos has tried his hand in the stakes. Otherwise, Rock and Roll Runa is a kind of Grand Circuit type. Charlie May's an established horse. Do you feel that this is a race where it seems fairly obvious who the best is and therefore who the winner is? Or do you think that maybe you could take a chance on someone inside of this race?
I don't think it's obvious. I think that you could go up and down the program for all 10 horses and give a reason why you think they could be the winner. El Rey's coming off of his mile last time out, very sharp down in Lexington. Obviously, Buzzsaw Russ is very sharp right now. Why Not Now just hasn't hit the form that he was in last year towards the end of his 3-year-old year, taking on the Metro or whatever race is over at Dover.
It was the Progress.
The Progress Pace, yeah. At Dover, he was very powerful, and he returns to his home track of Hoosier Park last year, where he was very impressive in the Sire Stakes throughout. He just hasn't hit the form as of late here, even at Scioto or when he tried the Otten out at the Meadowlands. Christchurch, he could be speedy off the gates. Rock and Roll Runa, I was at the Meadowlands last weekend. Very impressive up the rail there. I believe Charlie May is a big contender in this spot. Don Tiger kind of touched on it a little bit. Scioto is very tough right now for opens, and I'm not just saying that. It's Seafire. He will be at the invite up at Northfield on Saturday. Art Attack also. Then Charlie May. 2 starts back, I thought he was finally going to pick up his first win of the season, and Seafire just came up blistering last quarter. I thought when they reached the top of the stretch, I thought for sure it was Charlie May again. Seafire came out of nowhere. Carvine has been invited to all the big invites so far this year. It's just been facing tough company. In his first start off that scratch sick from the battle, he flew home in 26-4 here. So he's been right there. We've been having some tough opens. Post 10, no favors, but he's not necessarily a horse that likes to be on the front end anyways. So if he can get involved in some sort of cover from Buzzsaw Russ or anybody else who wants to pull first up, hopefully Charlie May can be there at the end of it.
Yeah, Peter. I mean, Charlie May, definitely that back class, and also, too, just how gutsy of a horse he's proven himself to be. Yeah, you take Pond the Warrior out of last year's edition, Charlie May is the Dan Patch winner, but then you're getting into ifs and buts or candies and nuts, and quite frankly, I'm stuffed from dinner still. But that said, Buzzsaw Russ with those back-to-back 48 miles, Rock and Roll Runa off that 68-1. This is I don't know how you feel. I feel that this is also just a weird betting race to approach as well.
Yeah, I mean, I actually really do like those 2 horses that Don Tiger was saying, somebody would split them. And I could easily see they could finish first and third, but I definitely like Buzzsaw Russ and Charlie May. I think those 2 have a slight but significant edge. So if I were betting this race, I basically would box them exactas and maybe use each of them with another horse in between, with an all, and then the other one for third. I just think Buzzsaw Russ he came a final half in 52 flat last time. He's just been on top of his game. The way he won 2 starts back with that first over brush and just powered over everybody. I mean, he looks superb to me on paper. Charlie May, another one, they said they were babying him last week, but he still came a last half in 52-2. So, he's clearly sharp right now. I mean, I believe everything that his owner said about him coming into this race well, and I see him getting a nice trip. If it works out where he ends up following the 3 and the 3 ends up being first up, that's a great scenario for him. So I love those 2. I understand the arguments for everybody else. I just don't think they're quite as strong. I think I would use Why Not Now if anybody has a long shot if I were betting trifectas, just because I feel like that last race, the fractions were just so insane. And his trip in the Otten was terrible. So, I'd like him as a long shot, I guess, for third. But 3 and 10 for me.
Obviously, Mike, I know which way the wind is blowing for you. But another thing that's kind of popping out to me is just trying to figure out how this race plays. Because as Jacob mentioned, horses like Buzzsaw Russ, Coach Stefanos, they're not going to be carving their own mile. They're going to be at the whim of whatever is happening up front. And there is some speed. Like El Rey, it makes sense for Gingras to try and send him from the pylons. Duncan might want to try and go forward. I feel like Why Not Now is going to want to go forward. Rock and Roll Runa. But Otherwise, this is a race where it seems like maybe. Do you think it could be more of an uphill climb for those closers, where even if they can come home in 52 and change, they still might have a lot of work to do?
It could be, and I do think that Charlie's going to be closer in this race than he has been recently. And like Don said, he can leave. He's quick enough to pop a 25 and 2 early. I mean, if you look back to that Brower, he was quick off the gate from the 9 post. They went 53 and 4 there, and he was within 3 lengths of that. So he's capable of big speed early. He's got the inside second tier post. He could follow whoever he wants out of there, and maybe he goes behind Duncan. He likes to go away from there early. I mean, El Rey's not typically known for leaving, but more this year he's been forward earlier. If you look, there's a common line in this race too. If you look at the Houghton and some of the odds in some of those races of the horses there, like El Rey was 36 to 1 in that race. Why Not Now was 61 to 1 in that race. Christchurch was 45 to 1 there. Rock and Roll Runa was 89 to 1 in that race. Charlie May was 4.5 to 1. So that kind of tells you as far as how they match up together. And I realized that Charlie was coming in off a pretty nice race in the Brower there, but he's made over $2 million. I mean, he's a Grand Circuit horse. I know you see a lot of opens on his card, but he's capable of popping huge races at big times. I mean, he proved that last year at the Meadowlands. We know that his class is unquestioned. And yes, he's one of my favorite horses, but just looking at this horse as a bettor, as a handicapper, and you look at those common lines, the 12 to 1 morning line is just, it's going to stick out here. I mean, he's certainly not going to be anywhere close to that. My guess would be he's probably going to be about 4, because he's going to be the wise guy horse in the race. Buzzsaw Russ will take his money. I think Rock and Roll Runa will be far lower than he's used to being. But, he's been on the Grand Circuit all year also. I mean, he raced really well at Yonkers early in the year. In the Borgata series. I mean, he had several wins in those eliminations. I mean, he popped at 68 to 1. That was really no fluke. This horse is a legitimate horse. Now, he doesn't really, enter into the conversation, but maybe he's going to start. So, the big track obviously suits him. The closers are probably going to take a little too much money for being open type horses facing Grand Circuit type, pacers here. So I would probably be against those in the top spot. I'm going to try to get Charlie May home here, of course, but I just think some of the other ones, like you said, might be up against it, having to close and come 52 back halves, especially at short prices. So I would try to focus on the Grand Circuit types. I'm going to try to make Charlie May make this pay a little bit for pick 4s and pick 5s, but as far as on the win end, I just don't see that you get the price that you want.
One detail I want to touch on inside of this race, too, that we haven't mentioned is with the 4, Why Not Now? Jacob, looking at this horse, obviously still with Greg Luther, but a lot of times Greg will keep his horses with Todd. What do you make, though, inside of a race like this? Why Not Now? Knowing just the type of horse he ended his 3-year-old season on, now 0 for 6, moving into the stable of the top trainer at the grounds of Harrah's Hoosier Park.
Yeah, I've seen Tyler George do a lot more with a lot less horse flesh than Why Not Now. And, coming in when I just saw the entries and didn't see whose barn he was, Why Not Now was going to be an automatic toss for me. And then I saw he was in Tyler George's barn, and it kind of made me take a second look. That being said, I do wish he had one more start prior to the Dan Patch in the Tyler George barn, just to kind of get a better hint of what he was. But Why Not Now? We talk about Buzzsaw Russ and Coach Stephanos. There's a big 3 in the Indiana Sire Stakes 3-year-old colt pacing division. And Why Not Now was the super final champion. He won the Jenna's Beach Boy last year on Caesar's Trot Night, too, against Grand Circuit Company. He was every bit as good as Buzzsaw Russ and Coach Stephanos. It just hasn't translated here at 4. I know they bred him this spring. He actually stood in Indiana breeding the spring at Premier Acres, and it's kind of taken him some time to come back. I did do a double look there when he moved to the Tyler George barn, but I just couldn't quite talk myself into it.
That's interesting. I didn't know that he was pulling daddy duty over the spring. How does he seem then? Does he seem kind of like a different horse at 4, just from what you've seen of him, Jacob, knowing that information?
Yeah, so we haven't been able to see him too much here at Hoosier Park. I know he kind of started out east. I watched him. He has a qualifier. He paced in 152 and 3 here at Hoosier Park in the morning, and I was actually on hand that morning. We were doing our breakfast at the Hop, and I just noticed that halfway down the lane, the plugs were pulled. Wayne Miller was asking him, and all he went was 52-3. He only got home in 27-2 that morning. It just seemed kind of lackadaisical. And, it's just one of those things where we've seen some horses do the double duty, and it really kind of takes hold. Catch the Fire went on to win this race after he did double duty. We all know what Bulldog Hanover became, but why not now? He just hasn't seemed quite as interested. This was a horse that could take a lot of air and was very, very tough on the front end last year at 3. He was the grittiest of the 3 and can kind of make his own race. And just here at 4, I haven't seen that from him.
And you mentioned the exact reason why I was interested, because Bulldog Hanover famously was able to go and be a father for a bit, and then came back to the races all big and strong then to go and be the fastest horse ever. But I guess maybe why not now? His mind is on other things. Who knows? But all of that said, that's the Dan Patch. Unless anyone has any other final thoughts, any other long shots, maybe they want to sneak on to some exotics, because of course this race has that $30,000 guaranteed superfecta. Anyone kind of keen? I know Pete was on the 4 Why Not Now as an underneath horse. I certainly like that horse on the underneath spots as well. Anyone kind of looking at some prices to throw on for that super?
An interesting one that we haven't talked about, I don't think, 7 Colors. Last week in the preferred at the Meadowlands, he obviously had a couple days off, and they opted to qualify him. He qualified well, and then last week had post 8. And I know it wasn't a really tough company last week, but he got away back. But he paced home in 25-4, 49-1 mile. You ought to think that would have been a prep coming into the Dan Patch. So kind of unfortunate that he drew the outside again, but we know that he can close on company like this, and Marvin Luna in the bike, he could definitely be involved, I believe, in that superfecta.
I know on Hambo Day, I was curious what he was going to do inside of that race, because you just never know off of the qualifier how aggressive they're going to be. But I think you're onto something with the preferred race and just how he took back. I thought he might try to go forward, but looking at that race more as a tightener, I definitely see the appeal of throwing a horse like him into the underneath spots. Let's then go around the horn for a little short clip that then we're going to put up on the social channels and all that type of stuff. We're going to go one by one and say who we like to win in the Dan Patch Stakes on Friday night at Harrah's Hoosier Park. $300,000 stakes event for the free-for-all pacing division. Jacob, let's start with you. Your pick to win the Dan Patch on Friday night.
I think it's Trace Dietrich's time. I think Coach Stefanos is the Dan Patch champion Friday night.
Ooh, how about you, Jenna? Who are you going for?
I'm going to go for the other local connections. I think Buzzsaw Russ is very sharp coming into the Dan Patch, and hoping he can get it done for the other locals.
Mr. Mikey Pribozie.
One of my favorite horses, Charlie May here. He's 12-1 morning line. You won't get that, but he's a Grand Circuit horse facing a few overnight types in this race. He likes this racetrack. Get Charlie May off the schneid this year. First win this year for Charlie May and the Dan Patch.
Peter Kleinhans, who are you going with in the Dan Patch?
Well, if I'm just going to name one horse, I'll name Charlie May as well. I like him here. I also like Buzzsaw Russ, but I think you're going to get better value with Charlie May. And he might get a better trip, especially if he's able to follow the 3. So I will go with Charlie May along with Mike.
I also like Charlie May, but I also think he does stand a good chance to win in the Dan Patch Stakes, going as race 13, as it says down there, for $300,000 on Friday night, August 9th. Features a $30,000 superfecta guaranteed pool. Let's get to some other guaranteed pools then to wrap this show. Pick 4, which starts in race 12. Of course, we've talked about all of the races already. Let's start giving out some ticket ideas for these sequences. That pick 4, $30,000 guaranteed pool. Jacob, let's start with you. Give the people at home or the ADW, or quite honestly, wherever the hell anyone can watch this, because it's the future, a ticket idea for this pick 4 sequence.
Yeah, $27 ticket for me here in the late pick 4. We're going to go 3 deep in the 12. Talked about how we like Away We Go at a price 15-1. Also threw on the 2 elim winners, Mock David, getting Mark McDonald coming into town. Then from the second tier, Big Wheels with Brett Miller. Then once you get to the 12th race, or the 13th rather, the Dan Patch, I'm going to go ahead and go with Three deep here again. I'm going to include El Rey. Yannick Gingras still making the trip over when a lot of the other Grand Circuit drivers decided against coming over. So that kind of perked my interest a little bit. He's a two-time Dan Patch champion, along with Coach Stephanos and Charlie May, who everyone likes as well. Then once you get to the 14th, going to try to beat the favorite in Angel Hill. Going to try to beat her with a couple of the 3-year-olds in All JK, who Trace Teacher went with in the spot. Also keep an eye on Sweet Tell. Kyle Wilfong back in the bike. He's fared very well with this 4-year-old mare. And then I like the other Jamie McCumber trainee, Flirtin' Panera from the second tier, starting with her nose right on the Brett Miller helmet. And then going to wrap it up 2 deep in the finale. Going to go with Sweet Truth at 7-2, who I know we all liked. Beaten favorite last time out, but I think the early speed in this race sets up for him to close well. Similar story with Rockin' Marty. Swept the field last time, got home in 26 flat, been raced against much better company for Team McCumber, so I like him at 9-2 as well.
Is your pick 5 fairly similar with just some horses tacked on the front?
I singled Bunduran in the late pick 5. I really like him in that spot. I think some of these other horses are going to take a little bit too much money. I like the addition of Brett Miller, who's familiar with this horse, drove him over in Ohio. So I just singled him there in that opening leg of the early pick 5.
$27 for Jacob. Jenna, how about your ticket idea for the pick 4 and then the pick 5?
I also spent $27 in leg 1 of the pick 4. I go 3 deep, the 1, 5, and 10. I like Mark McDonald in the bike this week. We know he likes to be aggressive off of the wings. Mark David got a win last time out in 50 and 3s coming into this race. Pretty sharp, but I hope Shakertown, he's 10-1 on the morning line for Marvin Luna in the bike for the second consecutive week. You get to start from the pylon, so you might be able to trip out, hopefully, on somebody's helmet, and could start the pick 4 off at a price. I also use big wheels for Jeff Culver. Brett Miller gets to call this week. And in leg 2, I use the 3, 7, and 10. It's really hard for me to leave off Rock and Roll Aruna just for the fact of adding Mark McDonald coming off of that big win. But hopefully Buzzsaw Russ and Coach Stephanos and Charlie May will be included on the tickets. Obviously, we've been talking about Charlie May. I don't think you will get anywhere close to 12-1 on the morning line, but maybe he will spike up the exotics, as in leg 3. This is interesting for me. I use Angel Hill, All JK, and Flirtin' Panera. Angel Hill will be a single in the pick 5 to save some money, but I go 3 deep in that leg, and then payoff leg, the 15th and final. I use the 1 and the 8, Rockin' Marty for the Team McCumbers, coming off of a win in against similar company, and was facing much tougher before that win last time out. So 9-2 on the morning line. Hopefully will offer some value in the payoff legs.
I think you're on mute, Ray.
I was coughing earlier. My mistake. Jenna, then in the pick 5, fairly similar to the pick 4.
Yeah, I single Angel Hill in that spot to save some money because I do believe those 3 will be the favorites. So I didn't single her in the pick 4. I wanted to go deep just in case the 4-year-old does get tracked down by the 3-year-olds. But yep, she'll be a single in the pick 5 for myself.
Thank you, Mike. I'm glad that you caught on to me muting, so I'll make sure that I click the right button as I go to the next person. Too easy. I'm going to hold off on Peter, though, because I don't know how you bet a multi-race sequence with an abstain. But, Mike, I will go to you then for the pick 4 and then the pick 5. How's your ticket looking?
So just $12 for $1. And I like the 7 Henry the horse in leg 1. I'll use the 9 Watching Our Coin and the 10 Big Wheels. I'm going to add the 2 on you guys' recommendation. Away we go. I would hate to be busted out of that pick 4 with that horse, since you guys made a pretty strong case for that one. Of course, we're going to single Charlie May in the big race. I'm going to single Angel Hill also. I just think she has to be beat. She's too fast for these horses. If the 3-year-olds beat me, that's totally fine with me. I'll be out. 3 deep in the last. 1, 2, 3 to finish up. I think those are the 3 logicals.
And then in the pick 5, I'm sorry, I think I missed the pick 5.
Yeah, for the pick 5, race 11, I would probably, I'm going to lean on American Classic, but I do think you could use Lowrider and the 7 also.
Okay, and then last but not least, Peter, how do you approach the pick 4 and the pick 5?
All right, well, in the 12th, I've got, I think, the same 3 horses that Jacob had, 2, 3, and 10. I like the way we go. I think Better Than Spring has a chance to win on the front end. And Big Wheels, I think, will get a nice trip from the second tier. Then in the 13th, I just used the two horses I like, Buzzsaw Russ and Charlie May, 3 and 10. No real value there. The 14th race, yes, I abstained from giving one pick, but I think it's a good race to spread out. Obviously, I got to use the one because she'll probably win. But I'm still adding a bunch of other horses because I'm just trying to basically beat the value from the one on the 4, 5, 8, and 10. So I'll go 1, 4, 5, 8, 10. I recognize that all JK will be a strong second choice, but I think that's made up for by the greater chance she has of finishing of winning. So 5 horses there, and then the single in the last race, Sweet Truth. So it's 3 by 2 by 5 by 1.
That's like 15, 12. I wasn't doing the math. I was just throwing out numbers. Your pick 5 then are going to be something similar to that?
Yeah, I'll use those same horses, and in the 11th, I'll use 3 horses: the 4, 5, and 7.
Well, spreading with Angel Hill, definitely a bold move, but you do have that single in Sweet Truth. I'm gonna top all of you though. Okay, so my pick 4 ticket's $3. All you need is $3, the same price as cheeseburger at some establishments. Other establishments, you probably get half a cheeseburger, quarter of a cheeseburger. I go 279 in the first leg of the pick 4. That's in race 12. I do like Away We Go. I like Henry the Horse. I like Watching Our Coin. That's why I use them. I use horses I like, and I like them because they're going to be good prices. In the second leg, race 13, the Dan Patch Invitational, I do use Charlie May, but I also do use El Rey. I do think El Rey does stand a chance. I feel like he's been outclassed in some of the Grand Circuit races, and from what I saw of him at Oak Grove, he's all right. He's an okay horse. He finally got that win in the Kentucky Sire Stakes, so I feel like he might be able to sneak through 2 potentially inside of that race at possibly an okay price. And then I single Angel Hill in race 14, and I single Sweet Truth in race 15. Same ticket then on the pick 5, except in race 11, which starts that 50-cent pick 5. I use American Classic, the 4, because in all honesty, many people on the panel made me like this horse. I use the 6 Quixote because I'm the only one on this panel that likes this horse. And then I use the 7 Bundarin just because I like the horse too. I know Jacob singles him, but I like him also. So that pick 5 ticket then is $9 versus the $3 for the pick 4. That said, we're missing Jenna's video right now, but we'd like to thank her for being on this panel. We'd like to thank also Jacob, Pete, Mike, everyone for watching this Dan Patch Roundtable discussion. Jacob, any other additional things people can look forward to then for this Friday night stakes card at Harrah's Hoosier Park?
Yeah, I mean, if you're coming out on track, we're going to have all kinds of entertainment and games stuff going on the night, handicapping contest, giveaways, everything you could ask for with a big night of racing. If you can't be here, be sure to tune into Fox Sports 2 because Gabe Pruitt and Jessica Otten, are going to be carrying the coverage there on site here for Fox Sports. That's the first of our 2 nationally broadcast nights, as they'll also be back for Caesar's Trotting Classic in September. So looking forward to that. Then on the in-house broadcast, it'll be myself and Michael, joined by Emily Gaskin and Bob Hollywood Hayden. Always love to have the Hall of Famer on a night like this. There's a lot of history, and no one knows more about history and harness racing than Bob Hayden. So love to have him for these big nights.
I also like that you alluded to Caesar's Trotting Classic and Hoosier Park Pacing Theory down the road. A little something to look forward to come September. But right now it's August. And right now what's ahead is the Dan Patch on Friday, August 9th. First race post time is Jacob.
6:15.
Thank you. I was going to say 5:45 for some reason, and I wanted to be right. 15 races on tap for that Dan Patch card, highlighted by the $300,000 Dan Patch Invitational in race 13. That said, that does it for this roundtable here on In the Money Media. Once again, thanking Jacob Rheinheimer from Harrah's Hoosier Park, Peter Kleinhans from his office in Oak Grove, and also his album, which you can listen to on Spotify whenever you want. It's his name. He doesn't have some kind of band called the Magistrate Heroes or whatever kind of funny name you can come up with. Mike Pribozie of this network and Jenna Otten of Scioto Downs and Caesars. I'm not going to thank me though. This is my burden to live my life as I am. But I am at the very least thankful that I get another day each and every day to live it. Hopefully you then at home are able to gather some knowledge on these races for the Hoosier Park card on Friday night. Hopefully you have some thoughts and have some winning wagers in play on what looks to be a fairly solid night of betting and racing in Indiana. Stay tuned on In the Money Media for whatever else is happening. Of course, thoroughbred action pretty much every single day from the Players Podcast, Harness Players Podcast. We have Mohawk coverage, so much horse racing coverage here on In the Money Media, but now it's bedtime. So good night, everybody. Good night. Say good night, Jet. Good night. Good night.